Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The following episode is brought to you ad-free by Daiichi Sankyo.
This journey also has turned somebody who's lived her life as a fixer and a giver to having to change part of who she is to be able to accept from people.
From Off Script Media, I am Matthew Zachary, and this is Out of Patience. On today's show, part 1 in a 2-part miniseries on rare disease, particularly rare sarcomas, and particularly clear cell sarcoma. Joining Andrew and me for both of these episodes are co-founders Lennie Woods, the executive director, and Molly Liska, the chief operating officer of the nonprofit group Sara's Cure. Sara's Cure is a passionate grassroots race against time campaign focused on funding and research to find a cure for, you guessed it, clear cell sarcoma. So while we spoke about all things emerging therapies, treatments, trials, and the origin story behind Sara's Cure, that being the miraculous survival of 17-year-old Sara Woods, who was diagnosed with the disease in 2016, the meat and potatoes of what we talked about really dug into patient advocacy. What does it look like in the micro markets? How does collaboration and not competition work when the rising tide mentality of making a difference far outweighs the more traditional and unfortunate practice of get off my lawn? Here we go. Enjoy part 1. Let's get to this because I'm excited to have you guys here on the show, not only for the fact that we are going to share a lot of drugstore psychology of being nonprofit founders and running nonprofits and chasing aspirations and using lots of jargon that we don't have to. But I think the one thing I learned about you that I'm very envious of, having been a nonprofit founder and executive director for 14 years, is that you've never written a grant on a pharma portal. Go.
I wasn't expecting that. Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think you're in really good shape having never done that. But if you are going to do that, you're going to need some definite therapy prior to your first time.
I kind of figured that out. We did write a grant on a portal. It wasn't a pharma portal. It was a private company seeking out 10 organizations with rare disease. And I think I can't remember. They ended up picking 30 because they had so many applications. But yeah, it was a lot of work, and the chances of us getting it were really, really slim. So I'm not so sure how our future, who knows? I'm not sure what our future is going to be like with writing grants, just because we get so much more done. Maybe one day we'll be able to afford a grant writer. I don't know, but we get so much more done by, just in person, face to face with companies and organizations. So it's,
well,
competing against everyone.
You've made an ometer of nonprofit leadership. If you can get through the portal where they have to tell you exactly what they need from a financial forecasting projection perspective, and the Excel spreadsheet that gives you hives, then you know you've succeeded as a nonprofit executive.
Well, I've gotten all that from other things. So
fair enough. Is that a TMI here on the show? I think that's perfectly fine to hear.
No.
But let's dig into this. Sara's Cure, you're here to fund research, drug development to fast track a cure for clear cell sarcoma. I know that, the cancer words to the average person are just everything's cancer. No one realizes there's like 200 of them. But at the same time, sarcoma's a word people may have heard of, but now we have subdivisions of sarcoma. So let's drill into that science, because my brother-in-law passed away from Ewing sarcoma. I have friends with the rhabdomyosarcoma. Osteosarcoma is a bone cancer. What is clear cell? Let's get into this. How did this get started? Not the medicine, not the biology. We know how the biology. How did you get into the business of clear cell sarcoma advocacy?
Well, to start, all those sarcomas you just mentioned, which by the way, they might be more common to you, but you probably deal with this. Most people, when they hear sarcoma, it takes them a while to remember sarcoma. They call us carcinoma because I think that's even, more in people's everyday vocabulary. But sarcoma, you're right. We've heard everything from there's 50 subtypes to 150 subtypes. I don't think anybody really knows. And sarcoma to us in Clear Cell, the ones you just mentioned are all to us very common sarcoma, which that's crazy to say because none of them are common. Clear cell sarcoma, which is the one that my daughter was diagnosed with. Yeah, who had heard of it? I hadn't heard of any of all these words were new to me 4 years ago. What it boils down to, like most cancers, is it boils down to a certain mutation. That's how it's defined, I guess, is through sequencing and FISH test and by the mutation that drives the cancer. So clear cell sarcoma, while it's got the name sarcoma, it's still very different from all of the others. And the ones that your loved one had, the Ewings, we actually share a half of a mutation with that one. But what we're finding is they're extremely different. So study-wise, they're similar, but so far treatment-wise, polar opposites.
So Sarah was 17 with this, and let alone being a young adult or a teenager with cancer, which is, I think there's 80,000 cancers under 40 every year. And in teenagers and children, it's like 15,000. That's the rarest of the rare, let alone getting a rare cancer in a rare cancer group. So great niche market you built there.
Yeah. In fact, that one of the doctors at MD Anderson, that's how she defined it. You've got there's rare cancer, and then there's the rarest of the rare. And that's where you fall. That's what they told us.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into the question of what sarcoma is just a little bit further. As the person in the room who probably needs to be schoolhouse rocked a little bit more than the rest of us. What do all sarcomas have in common? And when we talk about clear cell sarcoma, what does that expression clear cell refer to?
Well, great question. And we don't have our scientific director on here, so I'll tell you in the best terms that I can. But clear cell, just as the way I understand it, just happens to be the way the cells appear, say, under the microscope, which doesn't necessarily define it because there's a lot of clear cell type tumors that fall under clear cell. There's other tumors that are defined with that in their name. But we are a soft tissue sarcoma. You have your bone sarcoma and your soft tissue sarcoma, and we fall under soft tissue. It's, and for clear cell, we are, I guess what do you call it? Your stem cell, we're neuroendocrine. So we're from the neural crest tumors. Part of what makes ours difficult to diagnose and why it's so deadly and not heard of is you don't have a lot of pain from it. Like if you have a bone sarcoma, a lot of times like with osteo, kids will get a break. They might be on the soccer field and have a hit the ball in the wrong way and they have a break that really shouldn't have happened. And they go for an x-ray and they find the osteo. With ours, our tumors get really large before they're discovered because they just kind of push things out of the way because they're soft tissue. Like my daughter, the quick history on hers, which was really interesting. We were on a mission trip in Guatemala, and if you ever go on a mission trip in some places, most people will get some kind of GI issue, with the water, drinking the water, or eating certain foods. So that happened to her, not uncommon, and typically it doesn't bother you. You just kind of deal with it while you're on your trip. But her tumor at that time was less than 2 centimeters, which is very small, very, very small. And what we think and what the doctors think happened is that the inflammation caused by the GI issues caused the intestine to twist, because that's where my daughter's primary was, in her intestine, which is also, by the way, my daughter's version is the rarest of this ultra rare version, if that isn't even crazier. Right. But they found it and they took it out in Guatemala, and they were amazing there. We were at a private hospital, and then we got home, and that started the whole quest, and to find what is this and why doesn't anybody in this day and age not know about it or not have more information? Yeah. So, but they can appear anywhere. I mean, we've had patients with them on literally almost every part of the body, literally. And, ears, tongue, nose. The majority of clear cell sarcoma and other soft tissue sarcomas are found in the limbs and the extremities, but they can be anywhere.
Fun fact of the day, I had a neuroendocrine tumor.
Really?
Yeah, my brain cancer called medulloblastoma is considered a PNET, a primary neuroendocrine tumor. So yes. I think that speaks to the larger conversation of it's not about where in your body things are, it's how it breaks down genetically and how you address it genetically, correct?
Correct. And in fact, there are some, so what we do run across, and again, another time maybe Kelly could be on here and really drill down more in the science, but there are some crossovers in the research and the findings with your type of tumor as well. And there also is with triple negative breast cancer. They share, our main driver is often found in triple negative breast cancer. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it just speaks to the larger conversation of how far we progressed in understanding what cancer is. It's not one thing, and it's not localized to what part of your body it's in. And I think if I'm going to observe, and we're going to agree on this, because we did in the many times we've spoken in the past, that the way you treat cancer isn't based on your body parts anymore. We've moved past the whole body part of the conversation. Pun intended. And yes, you're going to have sort of disease-specific concerns. If it's breast cancer, clearly you're going to have issues related to having a breast removed or hormone issues. If it's brain, obviously there's a whole other literal ball of wax. But what have you learned? And you became the accidental advocates by your daughter getting this random diagnosis of cancer. Was it interesting to learn, or did you have preconceived understandings or expectations of what cancer was, and you're like, oh, it's not that at all?
Yeah, it was interesting to learn, but also it's ongoing. I mean, now 4 years later, I don't take anything. I know 6 months from now, what we think we know right now could be different. And that's why it's so important to keep the research going, but more importantly, to keep those researching neuroendocrine tumors or triple negative tumors. They need to communicate more, because this gets into another topic, but one problem is while it's not body part related, they do share what we call targets and mutations. And if we study why these things happen, then we can tweak our treatments a little bit better for each individual patient, which we need to do.
Great. Yeah, sure. So I had another question. So you were suddenly confronted with the need to not just be an advocate, but also to develop a business. Nonprofits are businesses. You had to become a business leader, and for that you needed operational capacity. And Molly came on board to do that. What was it like to initiate your partnership? How did it come together? Maybe you want to talk about that, Molly.
Molly, you want to say that?
Yeah. Lennie and I have known each other for years. We were college roommates.
Oh, wow.
And remained
Lots of secrets.
Lots of secrets. Oh, lots. That's a whole nother several podcasts, by the way. But we remained part of each other's lives the whole way through. So we were randomly put together and as roommates, and now here we were with Sarah being born, and then we all have kids, and we get into that stage, and then you get that horrible phone call with this nightmare cancer. The first time Sarah had her tumor, we all got on board, and I had called Lennie and said, what do you want me to do? I'll start a GoFundMe. Let's get this going. And she was like, no, I don't want to start a GoFundMe. One thing you'll learn as you learn from Lennie more, this journey also had to turn somebody who's lived her life as a fixer and a giver to having to change part of who she is to be able to accept from people, because that's not Lennie. Lennie was always I'm going to do it and, I'll take care of it. So she was not comfortable accepting any financial help through this because at that time it was not necessary. And so we, then it was just becoming an emotional support system for them through all of this, going to visit Sarah when we could and, just being uplifting. So when that first tumor was taken out and she got through the septic part of it and got better, we all kind of took a big sigh of relief and thought, oh, thank goodness, they caught it by fluke. This is rare, but because it was caught by a fluke, we're going to go on and she's going to be fine, because usually when they find it, it's so much more advanced. So she's a miracle. And it was not a year later that her reoccurrence came. And that phone call from Lennie was, it's back. We're having to be rushed to Sloan Kettering, and we've got to, have another surgery. And so it was back and forth with texts from there. And then it was one night at, I think 10:30 one night, I get a phone call text from Lennie. Sarah was asleep in her hospital bed. And she texted me and said, she's struggling emotionally. Come to New York. I'll fly you. And I was like, what? And of course, I don't fly. It's not my thing. So the next thing we know, I'm on a train at 3:30 in the morning.
Literally that morning.
How Orient Express of you.
Yeah, right. So I took a train to New York. So as we were going through that and trying to lift Sarah up and get her well after her surgery and coming back, there was that realization of, I was going to do a walk, and it started with this, well, I'll do a walk, because Lennie was finally like, okay, now that it's coming back, I might need help. This is now a whole different ballgame. And so I was like, well, we'll do a walk. And I'm, making these little designs of t-shirts sitting in the hospital room, and we'll stick people. And by the time we got Sarah home, and kind of started life back, and I came to Lennie's house for another visit, and we were talking about where do we need to go and what do we need to do with this. We had come to the realization that this was a lot more than just a walk. The more we had researched, the more we realized that money that we give to people is not going to go to the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. It's just not going to funnel down to Sarah's needs. And that's where it started, on the living room of Lennie's floor of, when it's your goddaughter, Sarah's my goddaughter, when it's your goddaughter and this is her life, a preschool teacher becomes a chief operating officer, because it's just what we do. It's what we had to do.
I think what we said that day when this kind of all really, when the first spark hit, was we were like, okay, how are we first, we never believed that we couldn't find something. There had to be somebody in the world. I don't care what corner of the universe they were in. Our words were, we've got to flush out. Somebody's working on clear cell sarcoma. Someone has to be. And I think that was how it started. And then it evolved from there. We were hoping we would just fund a grant to the person or institution working on clear cell sarcoma. And we were talking to institutions, and we were talking to Sarcoma Foundation of America, and they are so amazing. And even they said, we want to do this for you guys, and we want to help you get this grant. But, they were like, you may need to do something bigger. And so that's where it evolved. And if we think back to it, if we knew then what we know now, I don't know, Molly, we might have.
Right. Well, I think we still would have done it, but we would have been more apprehensive and not as cocky in doing it, I guess I should say. Sometimes knowledge and knowing isn't always better.
Ignorance is bliss.
It can be. It can definitely be. I want to commend you both initially for having, I would almost say, the predilection to not instantly say we're starting a nonprofit organization, but having a level of intellectual productivity to say, maybe there might be someone else doing this, and let's figure that out first.
Yes. And that was something we repeatedly said in the beginning, was we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to find that person and get behind them wholeheartedly, because somebody's got to be doing this.
Yeah, I mean,
we didn't want to waste time.
I hold people on the hook for rushing to start a nonprofit for no reason. And again, it's oddly commendable. In this scenario, you did the right thing. You said, let's not figure out what this is first. Maybe there's someone else doing this. And I'm glad you went to SFA, because yes, they're great. They do amazing work, but you're looking at, again, such a tiny little niche rabbit hole to go into. What was it like when you realized, crap, we really got to do this on our own, and if we don't do it, no one will get it done?
So, and Lennie, you can chime in. I mean, I think that we talk about this too. First of all, our personalities coming together for this is something not everybody has, I guess. I've always been the kind of person that if you tell me what we need, I'm going to get it. And Lennie is very type A personality too. So, in starting it we didn't really have a full game plan. I just remember looking at Lennie sitting on her living room floor and saying to her, if we do something, what is your number one goal? And her response to me was, my number one goal is to find somebody who wakes up every day working on a treatment for clear cell sarcoma. And so that then untied our original mission, because that has had to change, which we can get to later, but that was our original mission, was we're going to do that. So as we sat and discussed how we were going to do it, it just kind of naturally played to our roles of our personalities. I'm a connector, and Lennie is a behind the scenes doer, as far as, okay, I'm going to, call the state and we're going to get into this, and I'm going to see what it takes to form a nonprofit. Lennie, chime in there if I'm missing something. We really kind of took our natural roles.
Yeah, we did. And you get me emotional. I forgot. You're right. That was the single statement, is I want to know, or I want to find somebody who wakes up every day and their single goal in their job is to cure clear cell sarcoma. And
I'll never forget it. It's one of those images like 9/11 where you'll never forget where you were at that moment. Yeah. Us sitting there, me on the carpet of your living room and you on the couch, and that's something stuck with me forever now.
It's a real origin story.
It's pretty amazing, and I'm so thankful. And there's more. I mean, we have another member of our group she came in later in the organization, but at the time she was still employed as a cell biologist researcher at a institution. But she is another dear friend and become best friend, later in life. I didn't meet her in college, but our kids were friends. Anyway, and she's credited with saving Sarah's life the first time, actually, because she was studying this. Because she was a friend, she dropped everything she was doing and read every paper she could find, which wasn't many, but at least she could interpret them. At the time I couldn't, which I'm sure you know about, Matthew. But yeah, so boy, it's divine to have Molly and I, lifelong friends, and then other people involved, which has really made it work. And where it's evolved is patients started finding us. And actually patients had organized, and they were in a secret group that I didn't know about because I wasn't a big Facebooker. So when the patients started finding us, and one through a Google hit from New York City was the very first one. And I remember we set up not a Skype call, but a FaceTime call. And both of us were just so emotional, because it was like we found somebody else in the world who has this. Well, now we know 4 years later, well, that was, 2.5 years later, whatever, since the foundation started. But now we know that there are a lot more. And Sarah's Cure, we've been able to give a voice internationally to clear cell sarcoma patients. So even though we started out really thinking Sarah might be the only one alive. So yeah, it's like when, we started thinking we were going to be doing this for one person and anybody future that was diagnosed, we found there is a whole family out there, and we've become the nobody just in the past was, I guess, able to organize enough. Our patients are so sick, they can hardly, deal with their own, illness and health insurance, much less start a foundation or advocate or try to have a mission to find somebody working on it. So
I'd like to spend a few minutes, because this is a two-parter for those listening. We're going to keep an exciting conclusion coming up, but I can't not hear the words 17-year-old with cancer and not instantly slap my nonprofit hat back on. So I have a bunch of kind of lightning round questions for you about Sarah's story. that are relevant to what I care about, knowing that I spent 16 years of my career fighting for the fact that when you're not 80, you should be diagnosed and treated differently. And when you're not 8, you should be diagnosed and treated differently. So if I may, how long did it take for her to get a proper diagnosis, whether Guatemala helped or didn't?
We were lucky. We're not the norm in Clear Cell. It took us about 30 days, which is lightning fast compared to most. And I have to credit Kelly, our scientific director, and one of my best friends with that, because, you know, how many people have a cell biologist as a best friend whose husband who was also our best friend, had recently died from a brain tumor. So there were a lot of things laid out in the path that helped us get there faster, if you will.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So we were very, very fortunate. But normally it is much longer. It can be a year. Some of our patients, it took a year to get a proper diagnosis. And some of them are still, they're still dealing with having a misdiagnosis. We've had some go through 3 different diagnoses before they finally settle on Clear Cell.
Yeah, so, I can imagine. Misdiagnoses are very high in younger people in general, but yeah, not everyone has, Neil deGrasse Tyson as their uncle. So congratulations for picking all the right friends in your life. Exactly. My second question was, as a minor, was the conversation of fertility preservation brought up in any context?
Not with Sarah, no. That was, this diagnosis is so aggressive, and some doctors have said just relentless, that's not even important. And of course, too, chemotherapy usually will drive those conversations, and chemotherapy is not recommended with this sarcoma.
Right. That was my third question was, what is the standard treatment by which this is undertaken? And when you're a young adult, do they factor in a potential 60-year follow-up for survivorship than a 20-year follow-up for survivorship?
Okay, that's the $1 million question. What is the protocol for this? That's the question I'm trying to get regulatory to answer, everybody to answer, because it seems to be that the protocol for clear cell sarcoma depends on where you are in the country or world, because it's different. We went to 3 different NCI-rated cancer institutions, and we got 3 recommendations, 3 different.
Wow. Okay. So let's break that down in part 2. I really want to focus on Sarah. First of all, how old is she today?
Sarah is 21.
Wow, that's a scary age for a mom.
You know what? Listen, one thing that happens when you have a young person whose whole life is ahead of them, all the things that used to bother me or were important 4 years ago are no longer important. Go drink, go tattoo, go get a piercing, do whatever you want to do, go live life. So it's been an interesting shift.
Yeah, and I know this is radio, and you'll nod your head on the radio. And I'm old. I said radio. Podcasting is radio, kids. Look it up. Is that getting sick when you're younger makes you more mature more quickly? And would you say that Sarah has the intellectual mindset of someone far advanced of a regular, normal 21-year-old?
Yes,
remember, she's listening, so you have to say yes.
No, absolutely. And as her mom, it sort of makes me sad that she couldn't sort of progress with her, as her friends did. She's so much more mature than they are in so many ways. But then again, so many parts of that's a critical time in life for experiences, as we can all think back to between 17 and 21. And, yes. So that, one door was closed and having those wonderful rites of passage. But then, the maturity and other things changed greatly. And it's hard. I mean, we expect at 40 and 50 to start getting things. But at 17, that shouldn't happen.
And my last question, given the fact that I did spend my entire career in making sure isolation was the worst thing ever we could try to fix, had she been introduced to other young adults with any cancer, let alone clear cell, that were in their teenage years or early 20s? Some peer support?
Are you asking, had she been introduced?
Yes.
Or has she been?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit of that started. And let me tell you, I have this theory because I've seen others deal with it at her age now. And it even goes up into really the 20s. When you're beyond, say, 13, but before 30, it's a little bit different. You don't necessarily, it's not like when you're 5 or 8 and you're in a hospital like a St. Jude or something, and you're making friends with everybody on the hall. It's not, they're very private at this age, which adds to some of the difficulty in getting the publicity for it. I sit on some advisory councils and things about sarcoma groups, and there are some young people on there, and I always really commend them because it is hard for their peer group they'll be influencers on social media when it comes to TikToking and all that. But when it comes to something like this, that's not what your peers understand or know about or necessarily want to hear about. Sarah's been very careful with her groups, especially in college, that she doesn't talk about it openly until she gets close to people. So she didn't really want necessarily to meet others. And I've talked to other parents whose kids are the same. In fact, I had a conversation not too long ago with the mother of a 15-year-old male going through a similar thing. And they just do not want, they're not like others. You know how teenagers are. It's private. So it's a lot harder actually in some ways. I think, Molly, didn't we talk about that? I said, gosh, I mean, even in the legal aspects of her care, in the very beginning, which she's totally in a different, when the second tumor came back, man, it was way different than the first one. In the first one, it's like, Mom, why do you think you know more than the doctors? And when the second one came, after she had matured a whole bunch in that year, she even saw how, I don't know how to say it, but where the doctors didn't really know. We already knew a lot about the clear cell by that point when the second one came back. And so locally, our doctors were very wrong about some of the stuff they were saying. They thought they were right, but we already knew from traveling and going to other specialty centers that they were very wrong. So, now she gets it, but for a 17-year-old, it's tough. They don't want you introducing them. Oh, here's another kid that's got it. It's a hard thing, especially with this. And Matthew, especially when they don't do chemo.
Yeah,
so,
I get that. I totally get that. I didn't do chemo either, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah. It's almost like people don't think they're sick, and you just can't explain it to everybody because they look very healthy until they're not. Yeah, it's bad.
Well, stigma and judgments notwithstanding, this was a great part 1 to deconstruct Sarah's Cure, talking with Lennie and Molly from sarahscure.org. We're going to dive deeper into what it's like to actually grow a nonprofit organization, join a tribe like the National Organization of Rare Disorders, leaning into what the actual research is in the genomics of testing, and what you can discover when you learn the FDA can actually get things done. So stay tuned for part 2, and we'll see you then. Well, there you have it. Part 1 in our 2-part mini-series on clear cell sarcoma. We hope you've learned a whole bunch today about the disease, what it takes to make a difference, the challenges and opportunities that are facing anyone that really wants to make a dent in the universe, and more to be continued in part 2. So be sure to join us when that show drops. See you next time.
That's all for today, folks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a product of Offscript Media. Our executive producer is Matthew Zachary. Our senior producers are Jen Horangeff and Andrew McDowell. Darren Tunn is our production intern. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Matthew Zachary. Our theme music is by the Mike Van Allen Quintet and by Mara. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. Hit us up at contact@offscript.com to share comments, feedback, and make guest recommendations. For more information, visit offscript.com.